Greetings, I'm Professor K, and in this short video presentation we're going to see how we go about promoting Server Core to a domain controller. For this demonstration I'll be using Server 2019, but the steps I'm about to show you would apply to Server 2012, Server 2016, or Server 2019. So the first thing we got to do is log on to our Server Core and check its status, whether or not it's a member of the domain or if it's a member of a work group. So let's go ahead and just send over that Control-Alt-Delete, and I'm going to log on as administrator, and it says welcome. Go ahead and let my profile load up, and when it's done it's going to give me a command prompt. Now from here, from this command prompt, we're going to go ahead and we're going to run the sconfig utility. Let that load up, and you'll see that we are currently a member of the work group, and we also need to check our TCP/IP configuration. So we're going to type in number 8 and see how we're configured with an IP address. Currently we're picking up a default IP address from our VirtualBox, but that's not going to work for us. So we want to make sure that we're using a host-only adapter, and we also want to make sure that we're configured with an IP address and all the information that this machine needs to be able to see the domain controller. So let's do that next. So both of these machines, that is to say the domain controller and my core, need to be configured to use the same networking configuration. So let's go up here to machine, and let's go to settings on my DC1, and let's take a look at the network. Currently it's using host-only adapter. That's good. Now let's go back over to my Server Core. If we look at this machine's settings and we go to network, you'll see that it's using NAT. That's not going to work. So we got to pull this down and we got to select host-only adapter. Say OK. And now we're going to do a refresh. Now to do this refresh, I'm going to exit back to the command prompt. So I've cleared the screen, and now I'm going to go ahead and renew my IP configuration, or my TCP/IP stack. By doing this, I'll be able to get on that same host-only adapter networking that my DC1 is on. So let's type in ipconfig, renew, and we can see that my core machine is now picking up its DHCP information using a host-only adapter. So we're now ready to go back into the sconfig utility, and this time we're going to configure this machine with a correct IP address. We're going to type in number 8 again to get into the TCP/IP settings, and now we're going to select the adapter that we want to use. We only have one adapter, and the index number for this adapter is 1, and that's the number we're going to type in. And we're now going to set the network address, which is 1. And it comes up and asks us, do you want to use DHCP or do you want to do static? I want to do static because this is a server. So I'm going to type in S, hit enter. Now it wants to enter the static IP address. Now let's go back on over to our DC1. Currently the network range on this machine starts with 192.168.145. And the next IP address after this one is 10, but I'm going to go ahead and use 12 because I believe 11 has already been used for another machine called Data Center. So I'm going to go ahead and assign the host IP of 12 to my core machine. So I'm going to type in, and I now have 192.168.145.12 as the assigned IP address. Enter the subnet, and I can leave it as the default, so I'm just going to hit enter. Now it wants to enter the default gateway. I can leave that blank. And now I can set the DNS information. Now this is very important. We have to set the correct DNS server information if this machine is to join our domain. So I'm going to type in 2, and it wants the preferred DNS server IP address, and that's going to be the assigned IP address to my DC1, which is .10. So I'm going to type in 192.168.145.10. Hit enter. And I get a message saying that the preferred DNS server has been set. I don't need a secondary, so I'm just going to leave it blank. Okay, now we look and we check our current TCP/IP configuration for this machine. It is set at 192.168.145.12, default subnet mask, and the preferred DNS server is 192.168.145.10. We are good to go. So now we can join this machine to the domain. So let's go on back to our menu, and we're going to type in 4 to do that. Now we're currently part of a work group, but we want to join a domain. So let's go ahead and configure this machine as a member of a domain by typing in number 1. Join a domain, type in D. The domain I want to join is us.cyberoffense.com. I'm going to hit enter, and it wants to know who is the authorized user, and that will always be the administrator. Hit enter. Now it wants the password for the domain administrator account. And it says, do you want to change the computer name before restarting the computer? No. You must restart the computer to apply these changes. Restart now? Yes. And when this machine comes back up, it will be a member of my domain. My server core is back up, and we're going to go ahead and send over that Control-Alt-Delete one more time. So here's the thing. We have joined this machine to the domain. If I want to promote this to a domain controller, I must log it on to the domain. I cannot log it on locally. So we're going to have to switch users. To do this, I'm going to hit escape, and now I'm going to select other user, hit enter, and it wants me to sign in to US, and that's correct. So I'm going to type administrator. Now to ensure that I'm logging onto the domain, I'm going to type in US/administrator. I'll hit my tab key one time, come down to where it says password. I'll type in my domain administrator password, and we should be good to go. We're logging on to my server core as part of the us.cyberoffense.com domain, and we're just building our profile for the first time. So now, once the machine has completed logging you on, you can become a domain controller one of two ways. You can bring up PowerShell. You can use that on this local machine just by typing in PowerShell, or you can do it from Server Manager from DC1. I prefer to do it from the Server Manager on DC1. So let's bring up our domain controller. So if we're going to be using Server Manager, the first thing we're going to have to do is add our server core to the Server Manager console. To do this, I'm just going to right click on all servers and click on Add Servers. From here, I'm going to type in server core. I'll hit enter, and notice that it finds it. Now I'm just going to highlight that and move it over here to the right window pane. I'm going to say OK to that, and now it's going to try to go out and communicate with server core to get some information about it. So server core has been located, its IP address is present, so Server Manager has been refreshed. So you can do this one of two ways. You can right click on the name of the server you want to promote to a domain controller, and then you can open up PowerShell. This is the PowerShell that is going to be connected to your server core. It's not on the DC1. This is actually a remote PowerShell connection that you're running here. Now if you don't want to use PowerShell, then you can go up here to Manage. You can select Add Roles and Features. Click Next. Click Next. And you can select Server Core from the number of servers that you have to select from. Now this is where you will be installing the Active Directory Domain Services Management and Tools onto that Server Core installation. Just go ahead and click Next. And it comes up and asks you what you want to install. Go ahead and select Active Directory Domain Services, add the features, and click Next. Click Next, and click Next. Now you can install. So this is the first part that we have to do for every promotion to a domain controller. first thing you have to do is install the Active Directory Domain Services. When it's done, we can then do the promotion to a domain controller, which will be the second part. So now that the tools have been installed, we can go ahead and close that out. And up here you're going to see a yellow triangle. Well, that's just like any other domain controller. It's going to have to be promoted now. So it tells you promote server core to a domain controller. Go ahead and click on that link. That'll start the promotion wizard. And we're going to go ahead and select add a domain controller to an existing domain. That would be correct. Now once the wizard has completed its refreshing, you can then click on the change button and you can type in your administrator username and password. Now if it doesn't work the first time, just go ahead and you can append US/administrator and then your password, and that should help it find the records that it needs to promote this machine to a domain controller. Go ahead and click next. Now it's coming up and it's asking you, do you want to install DNS and the global catalog server? Now you have the option at this time to make that server core a DNS server as well. You don't have to, it's an option. I don't need DNS installed at this time, but later on I can always go back in and use my administrative tools to add DNS. I don't need it to be a global catalog server either. I already have one of those. Now it wants the restore password. I always use the administrator password for the domain so that nothing gets confused. Go ahead and click next. And now it can replicate from any domain controller, that's fine, or you can pull this down if you want and you can select DC1, but that's not necessary because we only have one domain controller. So go ahead and click next. Don't have to worry about the location of any of these default database locations. Go ahead and click next. And now this is your answer file that's being generated to promote this machine to a domain controller. Go ahead and click next. Everything with the yellow triangle is just the default information that you receive when you promote a machine to a domain controller on a Windows network. The only thing you have to worry about is this green check mark down here. That's the one that will determine whether or not you can promote this machine. If it's green, you're good to go. Go ahead and click on Install. Again, this is just more default information that you receive when you promote a machine to a domain controller on a Microsoft domain. When the promotion process has concluded, you'll receive a message up here that tells you that the server was successfully configured as a domain controller. Go ahead and close the wizard. And now if you like, you can go on up here to Tools. You can go to Active Directory Users and Computers, and you'll see up inside of the Active Directory Users and Computers, you now have a second domain controller. So up underneath Active Directory Users and Computers, just go to your domain controllers container, double click it, and you'll see now that you have two domain controllers. And that is your confirmation that you have server core added to the domain as a domain controller. So that's going to conclude this short video presentation on how we go about promoting server core to a domain controller for either Windows Server 2012, 2016, or Server 2019. So if you have any questions or you have any concerns about any of the information that was presented to you in this short video presentation, please do not hesitate to reach out, contact your instructor, and I'll see you in my next video.